let's just have a little discussion of what's going on here with the Dark Knight. I was gonna have this big old upload with this big old video talking about how Dark Knight really hasn't been the same as it was since Heaven's Word, and I realized what I was talking about there was a bunch of nostalgia and not really trying to take in the changes of the Dark Knight that it is currently, but there are still some problems that I want to talk about today. It's been a good long while since Heaven's Word came out, debuting Dark Knight and Astrologian, and to be honest, I could think back in those times and have really good and fond memories. What I had thought was their vision of trying to make a tank that was between Paladin and Warrior came in the form of a very aggressive, very powerful tank, and that's what I thought it was back in the day. An incredibly OP tank with a lot of things going for it, where it was just really brushing out both Paladin and Warrior out of the way and kind of taking the Paladin's meta for some reason. But as time went on, they've nerfed the Dark Knight, not to the ground, but steadily. Not so much as they're taking all of its toys away, but making sure that it's a level playing field. I could talk about all the old moves it used to have and how it functioned. I could talk about how Low Blow used to be Dark Knight exclusive, but now it's not. I could talk about how Reprisal was also Dark Knight exclusives, and now it's not. And it used to do damage and lowered the attack, kind of like how it does now, and it was a counter. It was kind of cool that way, though you could only do it when you parried somebody. I could talk about how Soul Survivor should have stayed. I could talk about how Dark Passenger looks a lot like Shadowbringer. I could talk about a whole bunch of things, but what I really want to talk about is just what is wrong with Dark Knight right now and getting right to the brass taxes. By all means, Dark Knight works as a tank very well in this expansion. There is nothing wrong with it being a tank, especially in Savage and harder content. I would see that Dark Knight will still function as a good tank, especially since it's doing most of the damage. I guess it's doing a lot of damage. I think it's doing more damage than all the other tanks at this point. To be honest, I used to complain about the Dark Knight's damage, but I don't think that was what I was really trying to talk about back in those days. Honestly, there is a whole other thing that was wrong with the Dark Knight. It wasn't the damage though. It's not about the damage. As people can remember in Stormblood, we had something called Blood Price, which allowed us to get MP every time we took damage, and coupled that with Abyssal Drain back in the day, it did not have a recast time, so we kind of spammed it everywhere and we never lost health because Abyssal Drain was just that good, and it only worked in dungeons. It did not work in solo play like raids or trials. And I think around that time we lost Scourge. I don't think we had Power Slash at the time, which looked pretty good, and I think that was in Shadowbringers. There was a lot of stuff that we didn't have, and we were just pondering, like, why did we lose this? Why did we lose Soul Survivor? That was really good, you know? And for those of you who do not know what Soul Survivor is, it's an ability that allowed you to place a debuff that didn't really debuff the stats of the target. What it did was give it a status called Another Victim, and when that target went down, when it was defeated, a bunch of health and MP went to the Dark Knight. To be honest, that's something that we should have now, or something that we need now, because as of Dark Knight right now in Endwalker currently, well, it just doesn't have good sustainability. For my Dark Knight mains and healers out there, if you've had trouble trying to heal a Dark Knight and you're pondering why it's not like this for Paladin or Warrior, and perhaps Gunbreaker, not too sure, they have harder corundum, it's really good. But if you haven't had problems with either of those tanks, but you're having problems with the Dark Knight, well, there are reasons. They do not have a good sustain and more. The Blackest Night used to be awesome. It used to be great. It's not a terrible move, but it doesn't have anything more than just that barrier. And in dungeons, the way that we play, we modern or maybe casual or people who really want to play tank and just take all the mobs to the back, it doesn't help so much anymore, especially because of the number crunch that we had gone through recently. TBN only lasts for about like a second before we're taking even more damage. We have to throw on mitigations. We're going to have to throw on Obligate. I hope I'm saying that right. And that ability feels like a half of ability. I think it's supposed to have been on another ability and they just ripped it out. I don't know. It just feels that way. And let me just say this right now. I don't think the Dark Knight is a horrible tank. It's just having a little bit of an issue in dungeon content. And I will say this right now, in harder content, savage content, extreme content, it'll be perfectly fine. But as of it right now, in the most, I guess you could say, numerous of the content, which is dungeons, and it's also the hardest hitting, it just feels a little squishy, you know? And the messed up part of it is that it's still my favorite job in the entire game. I'm not going to automatically switch to another job just because it's feeling kind of horrible now. No. I guess I'm still in that copium for Dark Knight, but listen, I don't think it's a horrendous tank job, I just think it's weak in one aspect. With that being said, so sustainability for the Dark Knight is very much needed, especially for dungeon content. And you know what, I would suggest if they were to take, I don't know, Blood Weapon, make it 15 seconds, it allowed you to do lifesteal on your opponents for whatever weapon skill you use to hit it. Perhaps in Delirium, when the big pulls come in and you have to do Blood Spiller or Quietus, you can have lifesteal on them. That would be a good idea, right? Or perhaps upgrade TBN, not just 25% of your health barrier, but perhaps a cure potency, maybe a regen, something, because TBN is being outclassed by what the other tanks have, which is supposed to equate to TBN. If you look at Holy Sheltron, if you look at Bloodwedding, if you look at Harder Corundum, they're supposed to equate to TBN, but they outclass it by far, I'm telling you. If you look at all of them, they have some sort of mitigation. They all have some sort of cure potency or some sort of cure to give them health back. They all outclass TBN by a lot, I'm telling you. So yeah, upgrade TBN, or God forbid, do something with Living Dead. For a long time, I think people had a conniption with Living Dead, and I do too. The first 10 seconds is not part of its 20-second invulnerability, that is just a buffer. And I know that's a very good window to open up that invulnerability, but let me just tell you, those 10 seconds mean nothing to the other 10 seconds that are within Living Dead itself when you become Walking Dead. There's also that chance between Walking Dead and Living Dead where you can die. I've actually died in between that window somehow through bleeding, I think. I'm not sure why that's there. I think that's a glitch, but yes, I have died between Living Dead and going into Walking Dead, actually. Now that can just be fixed, but what I'm really talking about is that 10 seconds that is the Walking Dead, where you are supposedly invulnerable. Basically, you can't go under one, but for that 10 seconds, it's not enough. Really. For one, there has been some healers that have been really complaining how Dark Knight's Walking Dead doesn't give them enough time to fully heal them through their health, and let me just talk about the description of Living Dead real quick. The part where it says 100% restored doesn't mean that they have to be peaked out at their health at 100%. It just means that they need to be healed for their full amount of health that they currently have. So if they have 50k health, they need to be healed 50k health. Like just like that. They don't need to be at peak. They just, like, say you're getting damaged, right? And you're at 10k, you're steadily losing, add, subtract, you received 50k health at that time, you will be safe from Walking Dead, basically. Honestly, I'm not even bothered by the whole death thing, it's thematic for the Dark Knight. However, I do believe that the Dark Knights deserve something to buffer this, to be able to get themselves back to full health even if they use their own invul. They're the only ones who 100% need the healer to help them out with their own invul that could kill them. Maybe something like 20 seconds for a lifesteal, 20 seconds overall for a Walking Dead, to be honest. Maybe a lifesteal, some sort of regen, some sort of healing, something. I think Dark Knight deserves something. If they did something right while in Walking Dead, they are able to get themselves at full health by themselves. I don't know. I just don't really like Living Dead at all. It's the worst invul in my eyes. It just sucks. I'm sorry. Even if it's thematic, I do not like Living Dead at all. And out of all this, out of all the bitching and moaning that I've been complaining about this entire video, you know what the fucked up part is? I'm not even all that mad about current Dark Knight as it is in Endwalker. I'm not even entirely mad about it. I think it's actually a good tank. What's really bad about the Dark Knight is that it's boring and it's not fun anymore. It's not the mechanics that's bad, it's not the damage, it's not its abilities, really it's how it plays, it's how fun it's not being right now. It's really boring as a tank job, it's more boring than all the other tank jobs. It has not improved between Shadowbringers to Endwalker. I don't see it anywhere. It has not gone from Shadowbringers, in my opinion. It's still there. I think Dark Knight is just not a fun tank to play at this moment in time. When you play Paladin, you're getting this stalwart knight who's able to heal themselves and use magic to attack, heal, and support the group. When you play as Warrior, you're playing as a reckless berserker who can sustain themselves by giving its own health back and just going buck wild in the dungeons and raids and any kind of content. It's just really fun, like a barbarian or something. When you play as Gunbreaker, you know what you're getting, a fast damage tank that feels like it's a DPS. It's just overall fun to play as. has. It's very explosive, very exciting, has a lot of action to it, though some people, in terms of how it uses its ability, may seem that it's a little congested in terms of its skills. Dark Knight just seems so boring. You swing this big blade, you slash a bit, you throw out these boring looking animations, which is just a line AoE. There's nothing explosive about it. It's very mellow, it's slow, and Living Shadow looks cool the first time you bring it out, but all it is a glorified DPS. You can't control it, you have to let it do its own thing. It's boring. So yeah, the biggest problem with the Dark Knight is that it's boring. It's not fun anymore, and I don't really play a lot of the Dark Knight as much as I really want to in the Endwalker expansion. I've been playing a lot of Reaper, and I think I'm going to be playing a lot more Gunbreaker over the Dark Knight. I will still be playing Dark Knight. It will still be my main. It's always going to be my main. That's never going to change, but I don't know about other people. Yeah, what do you guys think about all this? What do you think about the Dark Knight? How do you feel? If anybody out there is a Dark Knight main, please leave a comment down below. I want to discuss about this. I want to talk about this, about my favorite job in Final Fantasy XIV and how it just feels boring. I can't really play it and feel excited anymore. I've been, like I said, been playing a lot more Reaper than any other job, and I love Reaper. Dark Knight, on the other hand, needs a whole bunch of improvements, if anything, and even still more, it's just boring. I don't know. But I want to stay positive. If you want a tank that does a lot of damage, Dark Knight is your dude. If you want to do a lot of mitigations, Dark Knight is your dude. I think it will be great, and if not, it'll be the tank of choice in harder content, in Savage, in raids and trials and all that other stuff. But I wouldn't advise using the Dark Knight in dungeons. In fact, I've had a boring time through Endwalker going with Dark Knight through all the dungeon content, and that's pretty sad. However, it's still a qualified tank. It's still a really good tank. I still think that Dark Knight is a really good tank, and you should use it in raids and trials. That's where you're going to get the most fun with its abilities, not in dungeons. So yeah, it's still a fun class. It's still a fun job, especially when it comes to Savage and extreme content. Just not dungeons. Anyway, I want to hear you guys' opinion. What do you think about the Dark Knight? Please leave your comments down below, and if you haven't subbed to this channel or even left that like, if that really matters anymore, then please go ahead and do that. Oh, and put on the notifications. I think that's still a thing. However, yeah, let's make a discussion out of this. I want to talk about the Dark Knight, and I want to spread this everywhere if we can so that some people will take notice. You never know. They might actually change something in the next patch. Here's hoping.